In this week's video, well, just so many birds. What started off as a slow weekend ended up in a birding bonanza with loads of rarities and a lifer. Hello folks and welcome back to another adventure. This one was really fun, except for the drive there.
We're stuck. Stuck.
We're stuck in traffic.
We're stuck.
We finally got to our destination in the early hours of the morning and got a short sleep. We woke up to a bright but pretty breezy morning and a little later than I was hoping. So we got ready as quick as we could, as our first destination was hopefully going to give us a lifer. This meant a drive around 40 minutes down the coast towards Felixstowe, with our destination being Langard Nature Reserve. Good morning.
Morning.
We are in Suffolk again, this time looking for a bird that has evaded us. Like a bit of a nemesis bird really. A couple of times we've been like minutes away from seeing one and it's disappeared.
Even seconds.
Seconds, yeah. It's a wryneck. And apparently we've just bumped into someone and there's a few people ahead looking at something. So we're really hoping it's the wryneck. And hopefully there might even be a hoopoo somewhere nearby as well.
A bonus.
Which would be great. So stick with us, let's see if we find our nemesis bird and also a nice hoopoo. We took a walk down the path towards where the wryneck had last been seen, hoping soon to see some other birders. We had to take it reasonably easy, as poor Kaylee had had a week suffering with COVID. And although she was no longer contagious, she still had some symptoms like achiness and loss of breath. Regardless, she was pretty determined to see this wryneck, so we soldiered on, past large groups of wagtails feeding and battling the wind. We soon got to the place where the wryneck had last been seen, which apparently had been about 2 hours previously. We also learnt that the wryneck had been covering quite a large area, so although there was a lot of birders there, they were quite scattered. Hey folks, I've just found a sheltered spot because it's really windy. When we arrived, the people that were here, and there's plenty of birders, told us it hasn't actually been seen since about 7:30, which is a good couple of hours ago. So with it being a nemesis bird, I feel like we should stick around. So stick with us. Let's see if we find it. We joined the other birders and tried to find the wryneck on the ground, in the brambles, or anywhere else it might be. Occasionally talking to other birders who hadn't seen our target bird either. Although most of the other birders were also disappointed, everyone was very friendly. And although well after an hour and a half of searching, we still hadn't found the wryneck. But despite the blustery winds, there was plenty of other bird life. This place was pretty lively. Not only that, there was a very well placed bench for Kaylee to sit on when her legs were aching. Eventually though, the clouds came in and it started raining, so we decided to go back to the van and decide what to do next. Should we stick around hoping for the wryneck to show up? Should we see what else is local? Or should we drive elsewhere? A decision was soon made. Hey folks, I've left Kaylee at the van. She's had a week of not feeling well running up to this, and I'm going for what is apparently a very elusive hoopoo. Let's see if we find it. This hoopoo was apparently spotted on a play area in a private housing estate, and to view it you have to peer through a fence from inside a bush. En route I'd been told by a couple of other birders that the hoopoo had been showing well, but when I arrived it apparently had gone out of sight. This meant kneeling on the floor surrounded by a bush until it would hopefully come back. This position meant that only a small area of where the hoopoo was feeding was actually visible. Luckily though, after about 45 minutes of waiting, the hoopoo showed up. Although we were looking through the fence and some low vegetation, you could see it, and it was reasonably close. It wandered around the grass feeding, occasionally picking up insects. This species isn't a regular British breeder, but does have some past breeding records, the last being in Wales in 1996, and then previous to that, 1977. when 4 pairs bred in the south of England. Although breeding is very rare, they are pretty regular visitors, with anywhere between a couple of dozen and a couple of hundred showing up on either spring or autumn migration. And although they could show up almost anywhere, the majority are usually concentrated in the southwest of the UK. These colourful pink, black and white birds with a fantastic crest are very widespread, breeding throughout much of Europe, Asia and Africa. The European and North Asian birds migrate to the tropics in the winter, whilst most of the African and Southeast Asian birds are resident, although will make seasonal movements based on rainfall, some even migrating over the Himalayas. Fascinatingly, on the first Mount Everest expedition, a hoopoe was recorded at 21,000 feet. Although globally the hoopoe population is fairly stable, in Western Europe the population is declining. Conversely though, in the Middle East and North Africa the population is increasing. Regardless, these birds are fantastic and always a pleasure to see, even though I was knelt on the floor on pine needles crushed against a fence. After watching the hoopoe for a few minutes, I gave up my space for someone else who was waiting to spend time with this amazing bird and started to head back towards the van to see how Kaylee was doing. Hey folks, after about 45 minutes of kneeling uncomfortably on the ground, a bit claustrophobic against the fence, the hoopoe came down and fed on the floor. It was a little bit obscured by vegetation and not the best footage I've ever had, but still, what a bird. Absolutely amazing. And another one for the year list. Where next? Where next was a very important question, as although I'd got views of the hoopoe, so not a completely wasted journey, we had failed to see the wryneck, the bird we'd came here for, our potential lifer. I headed back to the van. When I arrived back, Kaylee was laying in the back of the van, but quickly perked up when she saw a report on our birding app. Hey folks, I hope you can hear me because it's really windy. I have rushed back towards the wryneck spot as it's been reported again. Let's really hope it's there. Apologies for the sound quality, it was extremely windy. Kaylee had told me to run and that she'd get her shoes and coat on and catch me up. So I hot-footed it to where the wryneck had last been seen, soon finding some other birders. Apparently, until a couple of minutes before I arrived, the wryneck had been showing well, feeding along some bushes, and then it went up some gravel steps and out of sight behind some brambles. So it was just hoping and waiting that it might show again. After a few minutes, it flew from out of the brambles across in front of us, then into some vegetation. Luckily though, it then moved to the ground, giving us fantastic views. I lay on the floor to try and get some better footage, and also text Kaylee. I'd sent her 2 messages, one saying just seen it in flight, and another one saying it's showing well, hoping that she would be able to make it. Little did I know, she was standing with some other birders not far from me. She'd arrived only a minute or so after me and seen everything. And there was me worrying that she'd missed it. Regardless, I was lay on the floor getting fantastic close views of this bird, a species that has invaded us multiple times in the past. The last one, and one that was particularly frustrating, was last year at Rishton Reservoir in Lancashire. We travelled up, and as we were walking up to the bird, people were saying, "It's showing well, it's showing well." But it flew off moments before we arrived, at this point becoming a bit of a nemesis bird. But that curse had definitely been lifted today. Wrynecks are closely related to woodpeckers, but different from them in a few ways. Their beaks aren't as strong, so they don't chisel out nest holes, instead using existing ones. And instead of clinging to trees, they generally perch, almost like a warbler, although come to the ground to feed. Wrynecks currently don't breed in the UK, but this hasn't always been the case. They were once common and widespread, but they suffered a large population decline in the 19th and the start of the 20th century. A decline so dramatic that by the end of the 20th century, there were no wrynecks breeding in England and Wales. Around this time, there were very small numbers breeding in Scotland, but unfortunately that's no longer the case. They have ceased to be regular breeders. Most wryneck sightings in the UK now are on autumn migration, when the birds pass through and are generally seen most often on the east coast of the country. As far as this individual today, it was putting on a hell of a show, making up for all the ones we'd missed in the past. We were genuinely blown away. That is amazing. There's loads of people in front of us, so we're being really quiet. That is super cool. We watched it feeding around the bottom of the bushes for a while, then it flew onto a bank, and then onto the top of a bramble bush. It sat there for a short while, perching almost like a small shrike, before flying down the ridge out of sight. This had been absolutely amazing, incredibly exciting, and I was quite emotional. Hey folks, that was genuinely exciting. They're just unbelievably cool. That's a bird that has just jinxed us.
Absolutely.
So even
he's very, very happy because he's always wanted to see it.
Oh yeah. And even though Kaylee's not feeling 100% because she's not been well, she still hot-footed it down and got a sighting of this bird, so it's a lifer for both of us. Absolutely. So that is absolutely amazing. Don't know what we're going to do next, but stick with us. We'll figure it out now. We did figure it out. We decided to go on a phalarope hunt. This meant driving from the south coast of Suffolk to the north coast of Norfolk to RSPB Titchwell Marsh. We're now 2 hours 15 north at Titchwell. We've got cups of tea,
which is good,
and an Eccles cake because I love them. Kaylee calls them fly pies.
I don't like them.
We're looking for, hopefully here, red-necked phalarope, so stick with us, let's see if we find them. When we arrived, we met one of the wardens here, who is a subscriber and a super friendly chap, so if you're watching, thanks very much for the chat and the pointers of where to find the phalarope. Our first port of call was Island Hyde, which looked over a large fresh marsh. Although we were here to try and find the red-necked phalarope, it was hard to ignore the hundreds and hundreds of other birds present. There were a good number of wading birds moving through the reserve, including black-tailed godwits, avocets like this wonderful one, and loads of ruff. Although most of these ruff were similar colours, there were the odd one that was paler, like this rather grey-looking individual. A little further out towards the island in the pool, we saw two waders feeding. This was a dunlin and a snipe, and a little in front of that, we noticed a scarcer species of wader, the curlew sandpiper. We see more of this bird a little later on, but for now, a species that has really started to take over the UK, a real success story, the spoonbill. We counted 15 or more here, roosting and preening in the shallow water. Although spoonbill bred in the UK in medieval times, they were absent from the country for over 300 years. That was until 2010, when a small colony was discovered here in Norfolk. And since then, they've begun to spread. Now, there's around 80 breeding pairs in the UK, and that number appears to be increasing. Whilst we were watching these wonderful spoonbills, one of the other birders noticed a small shape against the far bank behind the island. He had found our target species for us, the amazing red-necked phalarope. This tiny little wading bird was busily feeding on the far side of the pool, spinning round occasionally, picking insects up off the water. Although red-necked phalaropes do breed in the UK, they're very rare, with only a couple of dozen breeding pairs, with most of these birds breeding in the Outer Hebrides and Shetland. This species is migratory, and they do some seriously long migrations too. Although some of them winter off the coast of the Arabian Peninsula, most end up in the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of Mexico and Central South America, and on the other side in waters around Indonesia, Malaysia and the Philippines. In the UK, this species is most often seen on migration, where they can be found almost anywhere around the country's coasts. Fascinatingly, phalaropes have reversed gender responsibilities, with the female being more brightly coloured and the male bringing up and looking after the young. Although remaining distant by the far bank, this wonderful bird never stopped feeding. And that amazing spinning motion they do sometimes whilst feeding is apparently to cause a vortex in the water that brings invertebrates, its food, up to the surface. It was about this time I looked up and Kaylee wasn't there. I thought I might have heard her say she was going out to walk down the bank, but at that point I was pretty transfixed watching the redneck phalarope, so I headed out of the reasonably crowded hide in the hope that I'd catch her up. Hey folks, success with the redneck phalarope. We saw it from the hide. It was distant, right on the other side, but we can add that one to our year list, so that's great. Just need to catch up with Kaylee now, she's gone ahead. I soon found her, just as I thought. She was stood on the bank, looking over the pool from this higher vantage point. Although from here we couldn't see the redneck phalarope as it was round the corner, Kaylee and the other birders were watching something pretty cool. Remember that curlew sandpiper before? Well, now it was right up against the bank, just a few metres away from Kaylee and the other birders. It didn't seem too bothered by the admiring crowd as it fed with a group of ruff. We've featured this species in a number of our videos this year, as we've seen more this year than we've ever seen before. Although the curlew sandpiper doesn't breed in Britain, we do get a number of them showing up on migration, where they can show up almost anywhere around the coast of the country. And as we watched on, we discovered there were 3 curlew sandpiper present today. Fantastic. Now, as we started to hear thunder, we walked up towards the next hide. This is amazing, folks, today. Not only have we got thunder going on in the background, it's going to hammer it down any minute, but we've had the redneck phalarope and we've just had really close views of a curlew sandpiper. This is super. There's hundreds of spoonbills, all sorts of stuff. We've got a rainbow in front of us. Couldn't ask for a better afternoon. Although there was lots to see, there was a danger of rain, so we hot-footed it towards the next hide. Past a number of birds, including a poor injured ruff that was hobbling about, yet still feeding, and a large amount of geese. Soon though, we turned up at the next hide and took our place amongst the other birders present. Earlier today, there'd been a rare American wading bird here, a pectoral sandpiper, but unfortunately it seems to have left a few minutes before we arrived. Luckily we didn't need it for the year list, so we set about scanning to see what was here. Although it wasn't quite as busy as the other hide, there were still a few birds. In the distance there was groups of lapwing and dunlin feeding, and some shelduck dabbling in the shallow water. One of the other birders noticed a bird of prey at the back of the pool stood on a pile of bricks. This was a red kite. It kept moving from the brick pile to the floor, looking like it was eating something. After a few minutes it took off and circled around the trees behind the pool. So we resumed scanning the water in front of us. Whilst we were watching a couple of very noisy muntjac deer, the red kite returned. But this time it landed on the floor quite near the hide, giving us stunning views of this very handsome bird of prey. It had landed next to what looked like a gull carcass. The kite though didn't eat it and soon flew off, so we left the hide and walked back down the bank. Thankfully it looked like the storm had passed over in the distance, so unlike last time we were here, this time we wouldn't get drenched wet through. As we walked back down the bank we noticed our friend the redneck phalarope. It had moved a little around the pool so it was visible from the high bank. Also, the curlew sandpipers were still there feeding with the ruff. As poor Kaylee was still suffering with achy legs, we took one last visit to Island Hide where we'd started so Kaylee could have a bit of a sit down. The birds here hadn't much changed, although I did spot this absolutely fantastic bright white ruff. Male ruff in breeding season have some extremely flamboyant plumage, but it does vary in tone, with some being black, some being russet and some being white. And as they molt out, sometimes they keep some element of those summer colours. This one here was obviously a very white male, and even now looks absolutely stunning. Titchwell had been seriously good today, it had really delivered, but we had to get to our overnight destination and also pick up some food en route. Hey folks, well it's been quite a successful day to say the least after a rough start. We've now driven to our overnight destination, which is a favourite of ours, Frampton Marsh, and on the way, as Kaylee's not particularly well, she's recovering from an illness, she's taken it reasonably easy today, although she's done well, haven't you?
Well, yeah.
You've done well. We decided not to cook, and we've picked up food. This time, pizza! Way! Nice. As by now it was too dark to do any birding, we ate our pizza and settled down for the night. And although we did have to head off in the morning, I was going to get up early and do a bit of birding round this amazing reserve. Good morning folks, and it's a lovely morning too. We do have to go home soon, but I'm not going to pass up a wander around here. So stick with me, let's see what we can find. The path from the visitor centre towards the hide is bordered with sunflowers. These are now not really at their best, but are still attracting huge flocks of goldfinch. These beautiful little finches with their tinkly songs flock around these sunflowers, feeding on the seeds. As I walked along the path, the goldfinch flock would lift and would relocate on some sunflowers a little further down the path. As they fed on the sunflowers, they looked amazing in the early morning light. As entertaining as the goldfinch were, I wanted to head towards one of the hides, as last time I was here, on the pool in front of it, there were loads of waders, including snipe, curlew sandpiper, ruff, little stint. It was absolutely teeming. When I arrived at the hide to look out on the pool, it wasn't there. All the water had dried up, and this meant no wading birds. All I saw was a young male pheasant and some wagtails feeding on the mud. A little disappointed, I headed back out of the hide, but as soon as I did, I heard a familiar pinging sound. A call I would recognise anywhere. This was from a bearded tit. Last time we were here, we got some lovely footage of some very young bearded tits feeding in this same area. So I stood patiently hoping they'd show today. And very soon this wonderful female bird did. She came into the bottom of the reed bed just where I could see her, and I watched her for a short while before she disappeared. After that, I didn't get another clear view of one for a while, just fleeting glimpses, but they did remain very, very vocal. Hey folks, I'm stood by a reed bed watching some amazing bearded tits. When I say watching, I mean listening to and getting an occasional glimpse. But still, these birds are unreal. After about half an hour of waiting with the odd little bit of movement in the reed bed, one of the male bearded tits showed itself. Well, when I say showed itself, it was kind of visible. A little bit obscured by some grass and reeds, but I could view it well enough to see how absolutely beautiful these little birds are. This species that's known as bearded reedling or bearded tit is only very distantly related to other tit species, but is remarkable in appearance, with their orange bodies, blue-grey heads and black moustache. Although throughout much of the 20th century bearded tits suffered quite a serious decline in numbers, recently that trend has done a turnaround and their numbers have increased massively. Not only that, they have really expanded their range, turning up in many places they weren't before. I saw one last winter in Gronant in North Wales, which is pretty unprecedented. Here though, I watched this stunning male bird move around the bottom of the reed bed for a while, until I realised what time it was and started making my way back towards the van. En route, spotting this wonderful little ring plover that was patting the floor with its feet, trying to get insects. Although very effective, was quite comedic to watch. As I got nearer the van, a flock of geese flew over me. They were preparing to land in a nearby field. They went from a perfectly formed V to, well, something that looked quite haphazard as they came into land. But somehow they didn't collide with each other. Unfortunately though, it was now time to leave. But what a weekend we'd had. Hey folks, unfortunately now we do have to head home after what has been a bit of a whirlwind, really.
It's been fun.
It's been great. It's been really good getting that wryneck lifer and loads of other cool stuff too. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please like,
Please subscribe.
and please press that notification bell. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.